Isaac Shapiro, thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Isaac, can you tell us a bit about your backstory? I did read that you did LSD at 19 and it completely sort of changed the direction of your life. Can you maybe just expand on that?
Yeah, it was kind of like an accident. I wasn't really a druggie, but someone smuggled a Playboy into South Africa, and a young man, being a young man, Playboys they were banned, so it was interesting, and it just happened to be one that had an article by Timothy Leary where he was talking about taking acid and having thousands of orgasms a second, and as that really appealed to a young guy in the height of his hormones. So I had no idea what it was or how long it lasted. Me and a close friend dropped it at a friend's house when his parents went out for the evening. They were going out from 7 till 10. We just didn't know what we were in for, but all of a sudden, it was like a download from the universe. I was just experienced unconditional love. I could look at someone, felt like I could see the future, and like see what people were thinking, and I could just see that I was, at that stage I was starting to do medicine, and I could see I was doing it for all the wrong reasons, and so once I tasted that unconditional loving, I just was, wow, if it's possible to live like that, I want to. So I went and resigned from medicine, and even though I knew it would freak my parents out, but I knew I didn't really have an option after I'd had that experience and seen what I'd seen.
Yeah.
So that started that journey into, I didn't know about teachers, I just knew what I'd experienced, and I knew that it was beautiful, and I knew that it was possible. Until then I didn't have a clue that was a possibility. So my entryway was through LSD or acid, whatever you want to call it. And so, I just did what I could to get my hands on as much of it as I could, and just that was my only context. I didn't know about spirituality. I didn't know about teachers. I didn't know, so I was just interested in exploring consciousness through, I would say, medicines for me, because I didn't see them as drugs, so to speak. I saw them as doorways to see deeper into consciousness and myself. And so I guess, like many people at that stage, my vision was to move out to the country and start a community and grow our own food and build our own houses and all that stuff. And then, one thing led to another, and I kept finding the next step. I could just say it like that. And then at one point, I was doing what I called awareness work, because I got to the point where I could see that, often we can see what's going on in another person easier than what we can see in ourselves. But we have never really developed the tools for giving feedback that was useful. Usually feedback always came with criticism, like that someone was doing something wrong, rather than just pure information, like what I noticed or something like that. And so I had developed a kind of work where we would, people would take chances getting feedback from the whole group under the context of kind of meeting each other in a beautiful way. And because at that point, it seemed to me like certain qualities of attention, quality of attention that carried judgment or or duality actually was painful to receive, and there were certain qualities of attention that were nurturing and actually brought you alive. And so I was exploring that and doing workshops around the world. And a guy came to one of my workshops who was a friend of mine, and I saw him a little while later, and I had gotten reasonably sensitive to people's energy, you could say, and I could see something had shifted deeply in him. And when I asked him, I thought, was that from the workshop? Because I was used to seeing that kind of transformation. And he said, no, he'd gone to India to meet Papaji. And so that interested me, because at that time, kind of the mindset for me was like, you know how Greenpeace started off as a small little organization in a garage somewhere, and then now in the multinational corporations, when Greenpeace knocks on their door, you know, they listen. And I thought, wow, why can't we also do something like that? Because I could see that how humans were functioning were like lemmings going over a cliff, it seemed to me. And so I thought, how do we kind of turn it around? And so I was very interested to kind of, and to me it seemed like business was leading the way. So I wanted to work with big business and kind of see if I could bring something, a more fun way of functioning, you know, because no one would give up a good way for something worse. So I was looking for, could we find a different modality that made sense to a business mind? And so I was looking for other places and other people that were producing transformation and trying to incorporate it in that approach.
Yeah.
And so then I went to India to meet Papaji. And when I met him, he looked at me and he said, oh, you've already visited all these different lokas or dimensions. He used the word loka in India. I guess it's just different realms. And you've come here to finish your work. And he said, and now just bring your attention to awareness itself. And up to that point, it had never occurred to me. You know, I was working with attention, but it never occurred to me to bring it back to awareness. And so when he said it, it was like, oh, of course. And but then it started like an exploration in myself. How do you actually do it? You know, what is awareness? How do you bring your attention there? And so I just started playing that. And immediately afterwards, I had a workshop scheduled in New Zealand and also Denmark. And but when I got there, I saw I just couldn't do what I'd been doing anymore, because something had shifted from meeting Papaji. And so I told people, look, I'll give you your money back. And they said to me, no, look, we've looked forward to you coming here. And so if you've discovered something better, you need to show us. And I said, shit, I'm not qualified. I don't know. But okay, let's try. And so, you know, I had my first, I guess, explorations from that perspective with that group, and they seemed to like it and get value from it. And then the same thing happened when I went to Denmark. Because in like the way I was organized in that time, my organizer would make a living from organizing for me. And so, you know, I couldn't just bail on them, because somehow I felt. So the same thing happened. My idea was to just finish up my commitments and go back to India and spend more time with Papaji so I could deepen, you know. And I got to India and he said, oh, you found the diamond. Now I want you to be available to other people that have this interest. And I kind of knew what he meant, but it was like, in some ways I felt like he was, my perception of him, I could say it like that, was like, man, he was big. like huge space. And so it was like, okay. And then people heard in Lucknow where I was, and they invited me to come to their country and hold meetings. And okay, geez, how do I do that? It's like a whole nother ball game, because before, I was, Papaji never charged. He always did everything for free. And so, but I had kids and a partner, and I asked Papaji, how do I manage this practically? Because, if anyone wanted Papaji to go anywhere, it was clear they had to buy him tickets and they had to provide accommodation and everything for him. And, nobody knew me and nobody would be willing to do that with me. So it was like, he said, just charge. It's no problem.
Yeah.
So I was sitting with that and just trying to find what felt right to me. And so the way I came to was, look, I'll just do it on a donation basis. And people that invite me, their risk would be to find a room where we could hold meetings and cover the costs of that, and give me accommodation. In the home was fine with me. And once the donations came in, I'd cover the costs of my plane ticket and we'd split the costs until both our costs were covered. And if there was any extra, then that would be for me. So somehow it worked. It's like people liked it, and I kept getting invitations. And so next thing I knew was
almost as if life's taking care of you, huh?
It was like that. I mean, because I never promoted myself. I never did anything. It's just like, it just kind of rolled.
Yeah.
I guess if people weren't getting value, it would have stopped then and there. But somehow people were getting value. And
yeah. So now do you run satsangs and things now?
So at this point, pre-COVID, I was spending 6 months of the year traveling around the world, and 6 months in my home in Byron Bay, and I would hold meetings every evening during the week, and on the weekend I would do whole day meetings.
Yeah,
and then I would hold retreats. And the retreats I would charge a little bit for. I was like, I guess, one of the cheapest on the block. Because for me, I was just interested in that it covered my costs. It wasn't like I needed to be able to pay for my kids' schooling and stuff like that. But I wasn't looking to, it wasn't about the money for me. I just loved inquiring with people and exploring, and so I never saw myself as a teacher or a master or anything like that. I just, it was, how Papaji described it was, if you've seen the moon and someone asks you where the moon is, you can point at the moon. You could say, look there. And he said, but if you look at any finger, it's crooked. So don't look at the finger, look where the finger's pointing. So, like, I didn't have any idea that I had to be perfect or anything like that, because I was just asking questions that pointed people at the unknowing. So I never felt like I became anybody or, just pointing people at the unknowing.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I have a difficult time, Isaac, here. I like to label it as like balancing heaven and earth. So like there's that inner knowing and sensing, if you like, of the moment, which I tend to perceive as heaven. And then there's the balancing heaven and earth is your day-to-day existence, practical, pragmatic, running businesses and whatever else you're up to. What would you sort of say to me and others who struggle with that balancing act?
It's a fantastic question, Alex. It's like, to me, it seems like all that we have to give anything is our attention. So that's a big statement. Just check it out in your own experience, if that's true. What I have to give you is my attention. What you have to give me is your attention. But our attention has been conditioned. So if we look at this moment, how do we know that there's a universe? We sense it. How do we know there's time? How do we know there's space, energy, matter? It's all sensations to us. So this moment appears to us through our senses. And so it's a sensation. Usually that sensation gets interpreted always through our conditioning and through our trauma load, our inherited trauma load from generations back. And then we end up with the perception that feels real to us. But because it's an interpretation and it's, you know, it's in a sense, it's a waking dream.
Mm.
So the invitation to bring it, you know, like the recognition, usually we think it's the body that experiences. But if we look, we can see there can be a dead body and it doesn't seem to experience much, if anything. So it can't be the body. And also the body itself, how do we know there's a bodying activity? We sense it. Mm. So actually the bodying activity is a sensation to us. And a sensation can't have another sensation. So where do all these sensations appear? You could say whatever you call that, that spark of life or awareness, but whatever that is, it's here now already. Otherwise, it couldn't be any experience. Yeah. So if we look at it, for most of us, our habit is to be almost entirely focused on the content of awareness, what shows up, and the interpretation of awareness. There's very little attention just resting as that space or that intelligence in which all experience appears. So once we start to explore that and find, oh wow, is it possible to just recognize that space in which everything appears, including the content, but without, you know, like finding the balance where we're not ignoring the content, but we're watching it come and go, because what the nature of experience is, it's temporary. It comes and it goes. We can't hold on to any experience, not the most high or not the lowest low. You know, they all seem to come and go. Mm-hmm. So it's like, is it possible to rest as awareness in the context of our daily lives? But part of the difficulty is, part of the conditioning is, like, language turns everything into nouns. So we'll say a tree, or we'll say Alex as a noun, you know, as if, but really what Alex is to me, it's more like, it's a verb, Alexing, you know, so it's like, and really if I look at it, you know, I see something, I feel an energetic, there's awareness of how, you know, like energy is flowing, I could say it like that. But I've experienced all that in who I am. It's not from outside in, I know it from inside out, I could say it like that. And so to really be present with Alexing, I'm in that balance point of recognizing the space in which all the senses appear, and with, you know, as direct as I can be with the sensations, but of course there'll be some automatic unconscious interpreting of it. But, you know, it's like usually, I think the stats are within a few seconds of meeting someone, we form an impression, and from then on, we never relate to the person again, we relate to our idea. So, you know, so it's like, your question is a great one. So as life is happening, you know, part of the trip is, to speak simply, what we have is the sensations of this moment, yeah?
Yeah.
Now, when we were in the womb and our mother was in her life, whatever it was, when she had difficulty with our dads, or she had difficulty with her family, or with the, what was going on in the world, her system would contract. So our system was being conditioned already without having any, direct information to contract to certain energies, certain smells, certain sounds, and we had no control over that conditioning at all. So by the time, we were 7, 8, we've had all the conditioning in the womb, we have all the inherited trauma from generations back, and we have the conditioning from our early childhood. And so we're looking through a whole bunch of filters, yeah?
Yeah.
So what happened...
No, please continue. Please continue.
Yeah, so this moment is a sensation. The moment something in our system, in our nervous system, contracts habitually or automatically or unconsciously, it's experienced as dis-ease, not being at ease. So that's where our thinking comes in, because our thinking is the capacity to solve problems. So when there's some sense that something's not okay, our thinking will look around, what is it that's not okay? And so whatever it'll be, my relationship, my money, my health, the way I look, my house, something is not okay. And whatever is not okay, we don't want. And when we don't want something, it means we have it. And then it's going to come up with a solution. And whatever the solution is, we want, which means we don't have it.
Mm.
So whenever we're looking through that mechanism, which plays in almost everybody, we have everything we don't want, and we don't have what we do want, which is called suffering. So once we in that habitual unconscious way of functioning, life is not so sweet. So, it's like all we have left then is hope. One day it's going to be okay. But the other side of hope is hopelessness. And when we enter into that side of things, that's called depression or not enough energy to really enjoy life. So life moves kind of through these, I'm getting there, I'm going for my dreams, and it's never going to happen. It's like, so it's a funny cycle, but, and if it plays unconsciously, nobody does it consciously.
Mm.
But once we catch onto it and we go, wait a second, all that I have is this moment. That's it. That's all that anybody has. If you're a billionaire or a pauper, that's all we have. And how it's perceived has to do with how our attention kind of meets it. So that's the first point where we start to see, wait a second, it's never the circumstance, actually. It has to do with habits of attention. So, to me, that was a big wake-up to see that. Okay, it doesn't matter the circumstance. You can be, having all the money in the world and be miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it has nothing to do with circumstance, and people have woken up in prison, or woken up whilst being tortured. So,
yeah, there's a lot of teachers, Isaac, and they tend to, like, for example, you've mentioned trauma there and generational stuff. A lot of teachers, particularly in like the non-duality space, tend to say that that can sort of be ignored, and as long as you sort of rest in the awareness, for the lack of a better term, life will go on, which is true in a sense. But do you feel that healing, as it were, of those traumas is an important part of the waking up process?
So And you got great questions. So I can just, like that which is awake in you is already awake. The sense of you, which is the result of the old traumas, or the conditioning and all that stuff, that sense of I, you could say, that identification, that is where the difficulty is. Now we can say, okay, once you know who you are, that sense of I, you recognize it's not real. It doesn't actually exist. It's this construct from that conditioning and all that. Mm. But when in the course of living, something happens that touches old trauma, it feels existential. It feels like us, even though we can look and rationally go, no, there's nothing here that's really threatening me. How our nervous system responds is as if our existence is threatened. And when that happens, our nervous system goes into fight, flight, or freeze. And when our system is in fight, flight, or freeze, if you say, what about awakeness? What about unconditional love? Someone will tell you to piss off. It's like, so to say that it's not important, I would say, to me, it seems like this, there's like this interest comes by grace, by luck, whatever you want to call it. Something happens and we find ourselves with this interest. And if we are fortunate, there's a recognition of awareness, that which is unchanging, ever present, that in which everything appears. And we have either a moment of that or like a deep sense of that. But then there's a natural process that starts to occur where everything that has been repressed or you could say playing automatically and unconsciously starts to show up. And for the first time, there's the capacity to start to meet it. And at that point, it switches from working on yourself or trying to awaken to just being available for those automatic unconscious patterns that are playing to come to peace, because you see that it not only benefits yourself, but it benefits everybody you're relating to. And the people that are most affected by the automatic unconscious patterns that play are the people we love the most and the people that are closest to us, because that's where it rubs up against. Mm-hmm. So, in relating, any kind of relating, parents, partners, friends, when that relating is happening through unconscious patterns, it's going to rub and it's going to bump and there'll be hurt, there'll be, all the movements that happen when patterns are playing. And as long as they're automatic and unconscious, literally means nobody's doing them. But for sure, it gets triggered and a lot of times that's registered as, oh, I've lost it or something. But no, it's not. It's just there's I could say unintegrated information coming up in awareness. So that in a sense, by being present to and by exploring it, it benefits all beings. So to me, that enters into the second phase, in a sense, of just being available for that information to become conscious and get integrated and come to peace.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I see it. And everyone, will have their own take on that stuff.
Yeah, I see a lot of psychology and that line of work. And I'm not
See,
here
psychology.
Yeah.
There's some distinctions to make there. When these things, these unconscious patterns play, very often there's a sense that there's something that's not okay. Like there's something either not okay with me, or there's something not okay with everybody else. So it registers in that way. So, when hurt happens, for example, either the projection goes, oh, you hurt me, or there's something wrong with me that I feel hurt. But neither one is accurate. If we think someone else hurt us, we've just put our happiness in their hands, which is not a good thing to do. And then, we have to get them to be different so that we can actually be okay. Mm. And if we think that there's something wrong with us, which goes into, a lot of therapies. People go to therapy because they have a sense that there's something wrong with them. And then the professional will say to them, oh, yes, there's something wrong with you. Now you've got a professional problem. But when you realize, look, there's just something unconscious playing in me, and I'm interested in that becoming conscious. It's not me at all. I never asked for it. I just find that it's playing, and I'm curious to bring it to peace. So in other words, there's a recognition that it's an opportunity and that it's not you. It has nothing. It has to do with the conditioning or the old information from intergenerational traumas, or our own, or the traumas that happened during the course of our life stream. I mean, yeah.
So you've mentioned the nervous system a few times there in relation to trauma and things, and contraction and everything. Do you feel that looking after the body, mind, organism is an important part of, living well, holistic living?
Yeah, because, look, here we are. What we have is this moment. I like to joke or twist it in a funny way and say, this moment is as God as it gets, whatever God means to you. It doesn't get more God than this. So in some sense, if we, if we're receiving this moment fully, that's love. Unconditional loving. So in the moment, there's, again, like waiting for a better experience, or like, this isn't it. This isn't as God as it can be. Then we in this funny waiting for a better experience and missing the only thing we have, which is this moment. So, we've heard about being present and stuff, but it's like, what does it truly mean? Yes, I'm here, and there's anger or there's sadness or whatever. But, unless we go a little deeper than that, what's going on that it shows up in that way? It's like, how does that happen? What is it? You're just here, and then someone says or does something, and our system responds as if, with anger or with, like being freaked out. And wow, interesting. How did that happen? I mean, it's just out of the blue, and it can come in, like it comes so fast sometimes.
Yeah. I think as well, Isaac, what I sometimes struggle with here is the complete boundlessness and boundarylessness. And then the mind will do everything it can to compartmentalize it again, because it seems that it's just going to be completely obliterated. And there's there seems to be like an underlying fear that if I just stayed there, it would just, I don't know how to explain it. It'd be ineffable, wordless, and I wouldn't exist anymore.
Wouldn't be able to function. Yeah. So So it's interesting, because whatever that is that you're talking about is your nature. It's always here. We just, like all that happens is our attention shifts and it's not noticed.
Mm.
We never go anywhere. The only thing that actually moves is our attention. So just check and see if that's true. I mean, we hear, and there's that spacious presence, unconditional presencing, and then what happens is a thought or something comes, and our system, the focus changes, our attention changes, and suddenly it feels like back into some sense of identification of being somewhere, someone, and so that movement keeps playing, you could say, and it looks like there's a me that's lost it, or whatever it is, but ultimately it's just our attention shifts. That's, as far as I can see, that's how it is. So it's like, okay.
And that attention, I guess I'm moving into the free will type of, and I'm wary of the philosophical stuff you can get into. Is that a spontaneous happening, or is it like, okay, I am gonna go back there and reside there, or is it just a spontaneous happening?
Yeah. If I look at how life lives itself, like there's all these expressions of this great intelligence that we call people. In truth, there's no separation at all. There never has been, there never can be. But yet, life is organized in a way where this conditioning happens, and there's identification. So there's this sense of a me that has goals and wants and needs, and so it's like, and yet when we're resting as that spaciousness, there is no wants and needs. There's nothing that we need. There's nothing that we want. It's beauty. It's just, but yet, a thought can come, and all of a sudden, just one thought, it doesn't have to be more than that. If that thought somehow gets believed, and I don't even know who believes in it, but somehow from the perspective of conditioning and movement, like if we look at it in our simple experience, like whatever time of day you wake up, and what do we mean by waking up? We're in deep sleep. There's no sense of me. There's no sense of time. In dream state, there's a sense of me and there's a sense of time, but deep sleep, that's all gone. And then waking up happens, which means the senses become active. And suddenly there's, in awareness, there's consciousness. We start to perceive, yeah? And usually what happens then is a series of thoughts, like, where am I? What's going on? How do I feel? Whom am I upset with? What do I have to do today? All those thoughts of context. And because they're so familiar and so habitual, immediately we're in that world, in that universe of those. I mean, and my sense is, those thoughts have been conditioned. If you're an indigenous person, like in Australia, living out in the middle of the desert, you don't wake up with a sense of stress, what I have to do today or something.
Yeah.
It's like it's a different conditioning. So, what we call civilization is getting, like a training, you could say, of getting a very narrow focus of attention. And the sense of measuring everything and measuring yourself and comparing yourself. all funny habits when you really look at it. Why would we teach our children that shit? But once life starts to look through those habits, you know how it feels. It feels like, wow, it's not that pleasant.
Yeah. There's like a new age belief, if you like, that you sort of create your own reality. Let's say. Could you maybe speak to that and your opinion on that?
Yeah, for me, it would be the question, who's the you that does that? Like, is it the momentum of our conditioning? What is it that does that?
Mm.
You know, it's like without a thought in our mind, or you could say when there's a relaxedness and thoughts can just drift across the screen and nothing attaches to them, there is no problem.
Yeah.
But one thought that is believed to be real is the difference between heaven and hell, samsara and nirvana. Yeah, just one thought is enough.
Yeah.
So, we have this, if you've been in spirituality for a little while, you always hear about identification. And so I hear the confusion often where people say, oh, I identified. But to me, it seems like what happens is there's an automatic, unconscious movement of attention in which a sense of I arises, and then that sense of I claims to have done it, but actually that sense of I happened from that automatic unconscious habit. So literally nobody identified it, just happened from the momentum of the conditioning and the habits of attention.
Yeah. Mm. So you said awareness and consciousness in the previous few sentences. Can you distinguish between the two? Because they very often get intertwined, don't they?
Yeah, for sure. And everybody uses words differently. To me, it's like consciousness. For most of us, we had the experience of waking, dreaming, and then deep sleep. And if with a lot of luck, the sense of just being presence, you could say, the presence in which those occur. And so awareness, like in deep sleep, if I speak, there's no sense of I, there's no sense of time. The senses are dormant. They're not, there's no thoughts, there's no interpretation. In dream states, all of that happens. We have a sense of time. It's very different than waking sense time. So the moment there's either dreaming or the senses are active, there's experiencing. So you could say, and we're conscious of that experience. So I would say consciousness has to do with experience, and awareness is beyond experience. It's that in which all experience appears. But then if you look really carefully, you can see that there's experiencing happening, and it's a verb. It's changing all the time. So we can't ever really describe it because it's changing so fast. And we don't really know what it is. It's like, it's just aware of a flow of experiencing. And that experiencing is not separate to awareness, because you can't find a separation between awareness and experience. But yet it's useful to have a distinction between that intelligence space in which all experiencing appears, but that's beyond experience. So, kind of with consciousness as experience, and we're aware of it. With awareness, it's just the space all experience, I would say,
Yeah.
and beyond experience. So it's just a way of using words, I would say, but I think it can be a useful distinction.
Yeah. And Isaac, do you think that the individual can go through like stages of development, or do you think it's like instantaneous awakening, or both?
It's it's a great question. But so when you talk about an individual, what are we talking about? Where is the individual?
Yeah.
So, it's like if you've got a dream character or like an actor in a movie, to use that. So Clint Eastwood, and he's acting there, like, and he's this fast gunslinger or whatever. He's a good guy, and so that character. In some sense, he knows he's playing a character, and he knows he's not that character. But for most of us, we don't know, or we don't recognize that the character that we're playing is not who we are. So that character can't actually wake up, because it's actually just it's a character. So in the sense, that which is awake is always awake. It was funny because for me, I'd never thought of that. And one day I was being interviewed kind of like this, and they asked me, when did you wake up? And wow, when did I wake up? And actually, what's true is that which was awake was always awake. And the sense of I can never wake up, because in fact it doesn't even exist. It's it's a mirage, actually. So when you say an individual, what are we talking about? Usually we're referring to a body-mind system. But then, are we that body-mind? We can see there's a body-mind functioning through its conditioning and through its trauma. And so who's doing that? It's like somehow it seems to be doing itself. Well, this great intelligence is playing every single part. Anyway,
no, that sort of leaves me wordless. There's like nothing left to add or say or change or do anything else with it.
Yeah. And what's beautiful then in that, then we just hear, or you could say awareness is here, and there's just this capacity within awareness to notice where something in us contracts and thinks that something should be different, and explore that. And in my view, we'll be busy with that till our last breath. It's just like, and it's not out of a work or something like that. It's a love affair. It's just like, okay.
Is that what you do with the people that you share space with? Is that like direct inquiry into awareness?
Absolutely, yeah. And then also, when you get a group of 30, 40, 50 people, some people are having relationship issues, some people are having financial issues, some people are having health issues, some people are in the process of dying, some people, and man, what people have been through, I hear some of the people's childhood stories, and it's, man, it's unbelievable that they survived. It's like, some people are transsexual. Some people, and 1 in 2 transsexuals has tried to commit suicide a few times, and so there's so many kind of filters that life looks through. And so for me, it's just like, okay, when we're resting together, somehow we're just there exploring. And usually what happens is, if I just rest with someone, our systems come into kind of a sync, and, like the usual habits of attention kind of just become wide and drop into presence. And then people see for themselves, and no words are needed. But then sometimes words can be useful for just pointing, okay, look, can you recognize that at this moment the nervous system is activated and it's in a trauma response? Oh yeah, far out, I hadn't noticed, because it's so habitual and so usual, we don't even notice it a lot of times when it's happening. So just it getting pointed out. And then depending on how intense the activation is, there's ways of assisting the nervous system to integrate and to calm down and to come back to the parasympathetic nervous system, where there's the capacity of recognizing ourselves as awareness. So it's just like keeping on exploring, so people can start to see that, like the circumstance isn't what's really causing the difficulty. There's like some movements that happen usually so quickly and so habitually that they're not seen. And so once they get seen, it changes the whole it changes everything. But, it's how I would describe it, when we meet each other, when we sit together, like what we're giving each other is our attention. And when the quality of attention is presence with no agenda, not wanting anything, just resting, it invites a flow that you could call love. And so in that sense, we're all participating in each other's well-being. And when you get like 30, 40 people all like with that common interest, just resting together, man, the feel that gets generated is exquisite. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting then, because, if we use, like, if our caregivers had a dualistic habit of attention, in other words, they saw us an object, they might have loved us or loved that their sense of that, oh, my son or my daughter, or whatever. But the baby only has one signal, which is to cry. And then if our parents didn't recognize what its signal was, then they would be guessing, or like if when I was a baby, Spock was very popular, and they had this idea of letting babies cry out and don't let the baby control you with their crying. And I mean, there was a bunch of funny ideas around, which was traumatizing for people. Yeah. So, so if you really make it simple, like indigenous people oftentimes don't even put diapers on their kids because they can feel when the baby needs to go to the toilet, and they're in tune with it. And so if your caregivers aren't in tune with you like that, they don't see you and they don't feel you, it leaves a residue, an existential residue. And so then there's a yearning to be seen and felt. So when we start to be together with each other, not seeing each other as objects, but feeling each other, you could say like that, people start to feel safe. And then they start to speak about things a lot of times that they've never spoken about in their lives because it feels safe. And in the speaking of it, then there's an opportunity of discernment and seeing, okay, where's their charge, where's there something that hasn't been seen yet. And what I love in the meetings is when somebody speaks, it's just like to check with the group, how many of you know your version of what these people are speaking about? And, it's usually everybody. And then after we've done an exploration, how many of people got value out of it? And usually it's everybody. So in some sense, who's ever speaking is just the voice of consciousness in that moment, and it's for the benefit of everybody. And so...
Does the topic of death come up much?
Definitely.
Yeah. And can you perhaps share what would make them up and how you might answer a question? Something, for example, I suppose people would ask, is there life after death? Because they want a continuation of I suppose, and reincarnation, probably similar, that they want to continue in some way. Maybe could you speak to that?
Yeah, well, sure. So for me, it would go into an inquiry like, okay, what is it that dies? And what is dying? Like we go to deep sleep at night, and that doesn't freak us out at all. We like it, in fact. It's like, oh man, this is it's so nice to just like we let everything go.
Yeah,
it's just like it's actually beautiful. There's no thought of, oh, maybe I won't wake up or something like that. But so it's like, what is it that dies? What is dying? It's like, so it's like awareness, because it's usually referring to the body, like, oh, the body died or something like that. But what is it that's animating the body? What is that? And does that go anywhere? Or, it's like, and the body activity itself, it's not separate from totality because it doesn't exist without breathing. And to take the next breath, it requires the whole universe to be the way it is, So it's like, it's even at the level of this bodying, there is no separation, but somehow, there's this idea that we go somewhere or we leave, and then the question is, what is it that, so, when it drops and there's just presence, what left, what's not there? And so, yeah. So it comes back to this, really deep looking at who are you?
Yeah. But I can speak from experience here that there is like a natural, innate fear of not existing. Even with the awareness of awareness, there is still hence the reason, like if a car's about to hit you, you jump out the way, you don't just stand there. So there is...
but I'd say that's inherent.
Yeah, sure.
In physicality, it's like every life form. If you take a bacteria and you in a petri dish and you put poison on one side and food on the other side, the bacteria will go towards the food and away from the poison. It's just inherent in life, and it's like somehow life its program is to kind of live, but then it's like, I had a woman once come to one of my meetings, and her story was that her whole life she'd been plagued by this, what she called the fear of dying. And she'd done therapy up the wazoo and spent thousands of dollars. And so she came in front and she asked me, "Can you help?" And I said, "I have no idea, but the thing that comes across my screen is, are you afraid of dying, or are you afraid of the idea of dying?" And she stopped for a moment and she burst out laughing. She said, "Shit, I'm afraid of the idea of dying because I don't know what dying is actually." And she just laughed her head off. And I said, oh, that's really far out. That's great. And I said, please tell me how this integrates. And you know, and she wrote me a while later, she said that fear went away and never came back, because she could see it was the fear of an idea, not of, it's like, what, you know, you could say fear of not existing, but I would say that if there's non-existence, there's no one to not to fear it. It's like, so it would be, you know, like somehow touching something very expanded and going, whoa, will I survive that? And that's what troubles us, not the non-existence, it's the thought.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that resonates for you, but I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't remember being born either, and I'm fairly sure I'm not going to remember dying. So,
you know, I mean, it's like for a while I tried this thing just to see if I could catch the moment when I went into sleep, and all that happened was, you know, it's like I either wouldn't sleep because I was busy looking for that moment, or I was gone and it was over. I couldn't find that moment. So
yeah. Isaac, I need to wrap this up time-wise. Thank you very much for coming on. I've loved speaking to you, and there's definitely a resonance there with what you're saying. If people who listen to this want to check you out, do you have a YouTube channel or anything?
there are a bunch of YouTubes, but I mean, if anyone wants to participate, at this point, I do 3 Zoom meetings a week, and everybody's welcome to tune into them, and you can find information on that on my website, isaacshapiro.org. You know, times, because there's people that attend from Australia, Europe, and different places in Australia, some from America, so sometimes from India and different places. So everybody's welcome. It's on a donation basis, and some people give, some people don't, and it's pretty relaxing. Some people turn their cameras on, some people don't, but there's an opportunity if anyone wants to interact, that we can have one-on-one connection like this, and then people are welcome to talk about anything that's on their screen. And you know, with luck, I managed to ask the right questions that point people at their own knowing. So you're welcome too, Alex, if you ever feel.
Thank you. I will do.
This.
Yeah. Okay, Isaac. Thank you. Have a nice rest. Have a nice sleep. Don't try and catch yourself.
Thanks for reaching out, Alex, and I enjoyed this.
Pleasure. Okay. All the best. Bye-bye, Isaac.
Cheers.
Bye.